Have you ever wondered if your own family could lie to your face and steal what was meant for you? 9 million disappeared. The original will burned in a convenient house fire, and the only person who knew the truth was me. Here's what they didn't know. My grandfather left behind a hidden safe deposit box, Box 722, with 5 chilling words on the key. Don't trust the smile. Inside, a signed will, a video confession, and evidence they never expected to surface. I was the only grandchild he trusted, the one he added to his account when I turned 18, the one he handed a sealed envelope to, 2 summers before he died. In this video, I'm going to show you how they faked my signature to steal $9 million, how Grandpa saw it coming and hid everything in that box, and how I uncovered it all with just one brass key. Everything is real. The will, the bank records, the video he left me, ending with this: you were the one who saw through the smiles and still chose kindness. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you, don't look away. This story might be yours too. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to get to know you a little better. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. That way I can send you a special shout out. Now, let's begin our story together. The first time I stepped into the living room after Grandpa Harold's funeral, the curtains were different. Thick linen had replaced the gauzy, yellowing shears I remembered from childhood, those ones that danced like ghosts every time the porch door creaked open. These new ones were stiff, beige, and utterly joyless. So was the deed. Charleston in early fall was always humid in a way that clung to your skin like guilt. The air hung heavy with a cocktail of moss, memory, and lemon oil. Harold's scent was still everywhere, pipe tobacco and the faint musk of his aftershave, like time had folded itself and left pieces of him scattered in the corners. The house was quiet, but not still. Too many voices had echoed through its hallways in the last 24 hours. Now, all that remained was casserole, lined up on the counter like mourners who'd overstayed their welcome, and a note that said, "For the girls," in my mother's hand. Sophie was the first to break the silence when I walked in. "Avery!" she called, appearing at the top of the stairs in socks that didn't match. "You made it!" I didn't answer right away. I was still taking in the family portraits that had been rearranged, the antique rug that had been rolled up, and the faint outline of where Harold's recliner used to sit. I'd spent entire summers in that chair, reading library books while he hummed along to Glenn Miller records. Now the space looked like a Pottery Barn catalog, tasteful, sterile, and strange. "I didn't expect you to change so much," I said finally. Sophie bounced down the steps like a girl who'd never buried a grandfather. "Mom said it was time for a refresh," she offered. "We want the house to feel alive again." The house wasn't even hers to refresh. That was Harold's, or it was supposed to be. Martha, our longtime housekeeper, emerged from the dining room with a small smile. Her hands smelled like bleach and something warmer, like rosemary. "You must be tired, Miss Avery," she said gently, as if I hadn't grown up in this house, as if I wasn't the one who used to help her polish silverware before Christmas Eve dinners. "I'm okay," I said, brushing past her into the hallway. "Where's the master bedroom?" Sophie hesitated. "Oh, Mom and Dad moved in there last week. Said it made more sense now." My fingers curled instinctively around the strap of my bag. "Without asking?" "They didn't think you'd mind. You've been gone a long time." 10 years wasn't a long time when you'd grown up here, when you'd sat on the porch swing every summer and whispered secrets to the ivy. But I didn't argue. Not yet. Upstairs, I found a welcome home card on the dresser. At first, my heart leapt, until I saw the name, not mine, Sophie's, in bubbly lettering. Downstairs, Mom and Dad were already seated at the table, dressed like this was Easter, not the day after a funeral. Dad glanced up from his wine. "Glad you made it, honey." I wasn't aware Sophie was moving in. I said, sliding into the chair across from them. We didn't want to burden you, Mom said, her smile practiced, her voice just a touch too light. You've got your life in D.C., this house. It's a lot to manage. Sophie plopped mashed potatoes onto her plate like nothing was wrong. It's only temporary, she mumbled. They said so. I looked at Dad. He didn't meet my eyes. After dinner, I slipped into Harold's study. The fire had gutted part of the room last month, so they said. The walls bore water stains and smoke scars. What remained of his desk had been moved to the garage. But in the corner, behind a dusty armchair, I found what I wasn't supposed to, the old safe. And beside it, a drawer that squeaked open to reveal a tangle of keys. One stood out, a brass tag etched with Harold's unmistakable scrawl, Box 722, Don't Trust the Smile. My breath hitched. The next morning, we met at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. I have a copy, I said, producing the folder Harold had given me 2 summers ago, the one I'd kept in a fireproof lockbox in my D.C. apartment. He told me to hold on to this. Mr. Lanning, Harold's lawyer, looked over the document, then frowned. It's unsigned. What? My voice cracked. Dad cleared his throat. Harold was going to revise everything. That version was never filed. The fire destroyed the only valid will. I stared at them. Convenient. Then Mr. Lanning pulled out another envelope. This was delivered by your father shortly after the fire, dated last month. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately, and began to read. To my granddaughter, Sophie Whitman, I leave the house at 48 Riversong Lane, and all furnishings therein. I stopped listening. My hands rested on the table, still and open. I didn't speak, didn't yell, just stared at the words and tried to make sense of the impossible. Later that night, I sat on the porch swing alone, the same one where Harold used to smoke his pipe and hum jazz tunes. I reached into my bag, pulled out the key I'd found, and held it in the palm of my hand. It was heavier than it looked. Real metal, real secrets. And on the tag, those 5 words again. Box 722, Don't Trust the Smile. I asked her outright, Did you know? She didn't answer right away, just kept stirring her tea, 1, 2, 3 times, like the motion might buy her time, or silence. Then she looked at me, her voice light as steam. I thought they'd fix it. The breeze from the Ashley River carried in a faint scent of salt and magnolia. We sat by the cafe window, sunlight flickering through the Spanish moss. It used to be our spot, before life got complicated, before we wore words like armor. I watched my coffee go cold as Sophie pretended her world hadn't shifted under my feet. Sophie, I said again quietly, this isn't just a paperwork mix-up. They signed the house over to you. The new will, that was real? I didn't ask for it, she whispered. They said it would help with taxes, that Grandpa would have understood. I didn't press harder, not yet. There was something too rehearsed in her voice. As kids, Grandpa Harold once locked up all our Christmas gifts in the attic to teach us delayed joy. Sophie had peeked anyway. I never did. That moment came back to me now like a warning. After lunch, I made an excuse and walked toward the courthouse. Not for confrontation, yet, but for clarity. I called Jenna Clark, my closest friend from undergrad. She picked up on the second ring. You're not calling from Charleston, are you? Jenna asked, her voice sharp with intuition. I'm here. It's bad. The house is in Sophie's name. There's a new will, a different one. Jenna let out a breath. Okay, you need to pull the property records, county clerk's office. I'll walk you through it. I thanked her, hung up and stopped at Harold's study instead. The door, once his inner sanctum, now smelled more like paint thinner than pipe tobacco. I opened drawers quietly, looking for something that still held his fingerprint. That's when I found the calendar. It was a slim, leather-bound book with his initials etched in gold. I flipped through the last pages, heart pounding. Near the final week, a note scrawled in his thick handwriting. Box 722, last insurance proof. It was dated just days before the fire that had supposedly destroyed his office. That wasn't coincidence. That was a trail. I didn't go back to the cafe. I went straight to Carlton Hayes' office, Grandpa's longtime lawyer. The receptionist recognized me, offered her condolences, and let me wait. Carlton emerged 15 minutes later with eyes like granite. "They locked me out of the trust documents," he said before I could speak. Said I wasn't needed anymore, that Harold wanted a new arrangement. Did he? Carlton paused. Not by choice, and not without a fight. There was talk of power of attorney, but I never saw the final papers. Could they fake that? If he was under medical stress, Carlton said carefully, it's possible. It's also risky. But if a new trust was assigned with that authority and Sophie's listed as the heir... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That evening, Jenna sent me a photo. A screenshot of a public grant application Sophie had filled out 6 weeks before Harold's funeral. Under the question, do you own or expect to inherit property within 90 days? Sophie had typed, yes, family estate, primary heir. I stared at the screen. My hands shook, not with rage, but with clarity. The kind that doesn't fade with time or comfort. I knew what that meant. Back home, Sophie was in the sunroom reading some glossy magazine, legs curled under her like a child. I stood there for a moment, taking in the scene. Then I stepped forward. You filled out that application, I said slowly, 6 weeks before the funeral. She blinked. Her fingers tightened slightly on the magazine, but her face remained still. What? You listed yourself as the primary heir, before he even passed, before I even got the call. Sophie didn't respond. In that silence, I realized something deeper than fraud had taken root. It was entitlement. It was quiet, careful entitlement dressed in pastel dresses and polite smiles. The kind that never asked permission, only forgiveness, if caught. Later that night, I sat in Harold's old reading chair, the keychain resting in my palm. Box 722. The tag still read, "Don't trust the smile." I wondered if he'd meant hers or someone else's. Either way, I was done waiting for the truth to show itself. I didn't plan on checking the bank records. I only went to the First National out of habit. Maybe comfort. Maybe nostalgia. But when I saw a line item that read, HH transfer, 2,400 to 3,000 out, 18 zeros, to S. Whitman, dated exactly 2 weeks ago, something in me stopped blinking. The teller's name tag read Megan. She looked like she'd worked there long enough to know everyone by coffee preference. You're Harold's granddaughter, right? She asked as I slid the folder across the counter. He used to bring in peppermints and exact change deposits. Real gentleman. Yeah, I said, voice flat. He was. She looked over the folder I brought, verifying identity. I wasn't here to be sentimental. I was here because I needed answers. I had Harold's joint account number. He'd once added me when I left for college. For emergencies, he'd said. I never touched it. I just need a history of withdrawals, I asked, from the last year, and a list of authorized changes to the account. Megan nodded and clicked through a screen I couldn't see. Her fingers hovered. You were removed from this account 10 months ago. What? And the funds were fully transferred out on the same day. Different trust vehicle. Different account holder. I swallowed. Who? She hesitated, then turned the monitor. The screen showed a short list of transactions, but the final one stared back like a punch. Transfer to Whitman Family Trust. S. Whitman, primary beneficiary, signed electronically. By me. I pulled back from the screen. Can I get a printout of the authorization document? She hesitated again. You'll need to speak to a supervisor. 10 minutes later, I was in a private office. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, fingers trembling over a pen I hadn't asked for. The paperwork appeared, a PDF scan, time-stamped, certified, and bearing my name. My signature, only I didn't sign it. I texted Jenna. Need you, urgent. They used my signature. She called instead. I'm 2 minutes away from campus, but I'll hop on the court records portal. Hang tight. When I left the bank, the paper still clutched in my bag like it might burst into flames. I drove straight to Carlton's office. His brow furrowed the moment I stepped in. Was the account jointly held? He asked. It was, until they moved everything 10 months ago. Carlton nodded slowly, already pulling up Harold's trust documents. 10 months ago, Thomas filed for reactivation of Harold's power of attorney. Claims Harold was mentally sound and gave consent. But he reached into a drawer, retrieving a worn file stamped with void. This, he said, tapping the pages, is the revocation, signed and notarized by Harold a year before he died. I filed it myself. There was no active POA after that, which means any new authorization required explicit documented consent, not retroactive signatures. Could they have forged the new trust documents? I asked. Carlton's jaw tightened. They could have reprinted the POA, yes. But here's where it gets murky. The file they submitted included a transfer request co-signed by you. I felt the room tilt. But I never signed anything. Carlton nodded. We'll need a handwriting analyst, but from a legal standpoint, if they used your identity, it puts you at risk too. On paper, you helped authorize a $2.4 million transfer from a joint account into your sister's trust. Jenna called again. Avery, she said breathlessly, I found a notary record attached to the POA form. It lists you as being present. On a date when I know you were in Denver with me, I pulled our flight receipt. Can you email everything? Already sent. I hung up. Carlton looked at me with the kind of stare lawyers reserve for when things stop being cloudy and start becoming criminal. You need to be careful now, he said. If this goes to court, your parents may claim you approved the transfer, that you regret it now but were involved. I didn't say anything for a long moment. My mind flashed back to Grandpa's saying, one he used when teaching us how to play cards. Money can buy silence, he'd whisper, or a second look. Depends who's holding the pen. This pen had my name on it, but not my hand. Back at the house that evening, voicemail notifications blinked like warning signs. Mom, Avery, I think you're misunderstanding. These were family decisions. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Dad, it was to protect your future too. Harold wanted things simplified. I played them twice, then deleted them both. Later, alone in Harold's reading chair again, I unfolded the signature page for the 5th time, noticing how the loop on the W slanted wrong, how the ink bled inconsistently, how the signature was just familiar enough to fool the world, but not me. They used my name to steal from me, I whispered. And this time, I didn't blink. The key didn't hesitate, no stiffness, no dust, just a clean click, like it had been waiting for me all this time, like Grandpa Harold had known I'd be back. He always said, don't trust the smile. And I'd always assumed he meant politicians or preachers. But the tag attached to the key made it personal. This wasn't about general warnings. This was meant for me. The vault facility was tucked beneath an aging pharmacy off the highway, the kind of place that smelled like menthol rub and paper receipts. Jenna drove us there, her eyes darting between the road and the GPS, while I sat quietly in the passenger seat, turning the brass key over in my hand like a worry stone. You sure this isn't too far? She asked. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, no, it's exactly far enough. Inside, the vault was quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed above. The man behind the counter looked like he had worked there since the Cold War and barely blinked as I slid over my ID and held up the key. He inspected it like it was a rare coin, then nodded slowly. Room 7. You'll want to close the door behind you. Jenna and I followed him down a hallway lined with narrow steel doors, each with a brass plaque. Number 722 was near the end. The door opened with a soft creak, revealing a single wooden table, 2 chairs, and a faint smell, like old pine wood, lemon oil, and dust that had waited years to be disturbed. On the table was the box. It wasn't flashy. Leather edges worn down from age, brass hinges dulled with time. But the second I touched it, Something inside me tightened, like my body recognized the weight before my mind caught up. I opened it. Inside, stacked neatly, were documents, envelopes, and at the very top, a small video player with a post-it. "Play this first." I clicked it on. The screen crackled for a moment, then settled. Grandpa Harold, in his old cardigan, sitting in the same reading chair now shoved into a corner of the living room back home. His face was thinner, eyes a little dimmer, but his voice? It was still Harold. "If you're watching this, then something's gone wrong," he began. "And knowing this family, I'm not surprised." Jenna sucked in a breath beside me. "Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless." Harold continued. "I need to make this clear. Everything, this house, the assets, the trust, was meant for Avery, no one else. I made that decision after watching who actually showed up and who just smiled for the camera." He leaned forward and the image shook a little. "If Thomas and Linda are claiming otherwise, it's a lie. I revoked the POA on April 3rd, 2022. You'll find the notarized revocation in this box, with signatures. As for the will, they'll say it burned in the office fire. That's nonsense. I had 2 copies. One is with Carlton. The other is here." He paused. "And if you're watching this, Avery, then I need you to do what you've always done. Look past the noise. Find the truth. It's all here." The screen faded briefly. Then he returned, not the sharp business Harold, but the grandfather who carved pumpkins with me on the porch, who let me drink coffee at age 9 because you earned it. "To Avery," he said softly, "you were the only one who didn't need to be asked to care. You did it anyway. You never took the easy out, even when no one was watching. That kind of heart is rare. Protect it, and use what's in this box to protect yourself." The video ended in a long pause. No music, no fade out. Just Harold, blinking slowly the way he used to when watching storms roll in. I exhaled only when the screen went black. Beneath the player were the documents. A notarized letter officially revoking Thomas's power of attorney. A second, signed will, same structure, same terms, my name listed as sole beneficiary. Witness signatures from Harold's longtime neighbors, Sandra and Louis, from down the street, and then something that made my hands stop. An envelope, labeled in Harold's blocky handwriting, "To Avery, 33rd birthday." I hadn't seen it last month. There had been no card from anyone, really. I opened it, and inside, a short note in ink that had begun to fade at the edges. "I don't know what this year will bring, but I hope it never makes you doubt the compass inside you. You've always known true north, even when others faked the map. Stay steady, kiddo. That's how you win, without ever needing to fight ugly." I didn't even notice the tears until Jenna handed me a tissue. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We scanned the documents, double-checked signatures, took photos. Every detail was clean, deliberate, dated. This wasn't just a stash of sentimental leftovers. This was evidence. This was strategy. "I'm taking this to Carlton first thing tomorrow," I said. Jenna nodded. "You want me to drive?" I shook my head. "No, but I need you there." As we left the vault, my phone buzzed. Voicemail from Sophie. Her voice came through the speaker, thin and uncertain. "Avery, I heard you went to the bank. I don't know what you think is going on, but I never meant to hurt you. They told me it was just paperwork. I didn't ask for this. Please believe that." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. "She's trying to make herself the victim," Jenna said. "No," I replied quietly. "She's trying to stall." That night, I didn't sleep. I watched Harold's video again, twice, studied every word, every pause. He had planned this. He knew what was coming, and somehow he still believed I'd find my way through it. He ended the video with a line I couldn't shake. It had embedded itself into my bones. "If they've used this to hurt you, use this to stop them." I closed the laptop, clutched the will to my chest. It was time. They didn't know what I had, but they would. The key slid into the lock smoother than I expected. No resistance. Just a quiet click, as if the box had been waiting, not for anyone, but for me. The vault itself wasn't even marked from the street. You wouldn't know it existed unless you were looking for it. It sat beneath a worn pharmacy in North Charleston with a sagging awning and a single buzzing light that flickered even in daylight. When I asked the pharmacist about archival retrieval, like Harold had told me to, she simply nodded and handed me a small laminated pass without a word. Gerald, the vault manager, met me behind the counter and led me down a narrow corridor with humming fluorescent lights and beige walls stained with time. He didn't ask questions, just tapped the clipboard, verified the key number, and pushed open a heavy door that smelled of cold metal, cedar, and dust. A different kind of dust, the kind that belonged to secrets deliberately preserved. Box 722 rested chest height in the middle row of the furthest cabinet. It was brass-faced, slightly tarnished around the edges, but the lock had been polished, like someone had handled it often, gently. The tag on the key. Harold left me still echoed in my head. Don't trust the smile. I swallowed and slid the key in. It turned without hesitation. Inside the box was a velvet pouch, a flash drive in a tin case, a sealed envelope labeled in Harold's looping script, for Avery only, and a small leather-bound journal. The spine cracked just enough to show it had been opened many times. I took the journal out first. On the inside cover, written in black ink, were the words, "You were always the one who saw through kindness and chose it anyway." It hit me harder than I expected. I had to sit down on the little bench against the far wall just to steady myself. Jenna had come with me, waiting upstairs with a book and a promise to stay out of the way. I texted her, "Come down." She didn't knock, just stepped into the room and sat beside me on the floor, cross-legged like we used to sit in Harold's sunroom when we were kids. I opened the envelope next. Inside was a notarized letter, dated 6 months before Harold passed, clearly rescinding Thomas's power of attorney. It bore Harold's signature, 2 witness stamps, and a notary seal. There was no ambiguity, no way to misread or reinterpret what he had intended. Folded behind it was a letter addressed to Carlton Hayes, Harold's longtime attorney, instructing him to update the estate records and file the revised documents in person. I handed the documents to Jenna, who scanned them with the eyes of someone who had written her share of contracts. "This is airtight," she whispered. "This isn't just precaution. He was preparing for a fight." I opened the tin and slid the flash drive into my laptop. The screen blinked to life with a grainy video recording. Harold sat behind his old writing desk, the one now repainted and repurposed in my parents' den like a decoration. He wore his burgundy sweater and his posture was tired, but his voice was clear. "If you're watching this," he began, "then things have gone sideways. And if they've gone sideways, it means Thomas found a way back in." My throat tightened. I rescinded his power of attorney last year. It was never meant to be reinstated. That paperwork is in this box, notarized and witnessed. I also redrafted the will. Carlton has the official version, but this copy here is yours, Avery. Keep it. If anyone claims confusion, you'll have the truth in hand. He leaned closer to the camera, eyes narrowing. "They'll say it's about fairness, that Sophie needs more, that you already have enough. But this isn't about need. This is about trust, and you've earned that." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "The others. They may smile and plead their way into sympathy, but if they use this to hurt you, use this to stop them." Then the screen faded to black. I didn't cry. Not then. The grief had already been buried beneath too many layers of betrayal. What I felt instead was a slow, rising clarity, like someone had lifted a weight off my chest I didn't even know was there. Jenna looked over at me. "This changes everything." I nodded. "It confirms everything." We repacked the documents carefully. I slid the note Harold had written in the journal into the front of my coat pocket. I wanted to keep it close. I needed to remember. Someone believed I saw through the noise and still chose grace. When we walked back upstairs, Gerald was standing by the door with a small package. "This was left with the box years ago," he said. "It had a hold tag, but I was told to release it if anyone ever opened 722 using a tag marked 'Don't trust the smile.'" Inside was a birthday card I'd never received, a simple one with sunflowers on the front and a quiet message inside. "Your strength is in how you listen, even when they lie." That was the moment I realized Harold didn't just prepare for the legal fight, he prepared for the emotional fallout too. He knew what it would take to hold on to myself once everything else was pulled apart. As we walked out into the crisp Charleston afternoon, wind tugging gently at the hem of my coat, I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt ready. The echo of Harold's words stayed with me. "If they've used this to hurt you, use this to stop them." And I would. I didn't want revenge. I wanted air and silence and the kind of peace you don't have to explain. That kind of peace takes time and a clean break. The Charleston spring arrived with a breeze warm enough to forget the bitterness of winter. I stood outside the old library on Pitt Street, now painted light blue, its front steps trimmed in potted marigolds. A banner waved above the entrance, "The Whitman Fund for Financial Literacy, in memory of Harold." I exhaled slowly. The last few weeks had been heavy with legal filings, notary visits, and one final conversation with Carlton Hayes, who personally handed me the restored deed, the verified will, and the letter from Harold. I didn't frame the will. I tucked it in a safety deposit box and focused on the kind of legacy he wanted to leave behind. Inside the building, chairs were set in neat rows. Jenna stood by the refreshment table, fielding questions from 2 local journalists. She waved, holding up a clipboard. "You ready?" "Ready enough," I said, smoothing my blouse. I hadn't slept much, but I felt steady. Each chair had a folder labeled "Start Here." Inside was a workbook I'd designed with Jenna, full of exercises on budgeting, protecting your assets, and spotting red flags in financial contracts. No jargon, no condescension, just plain knowledge, what Harold had always believed everyone deserved. A small hand tugged at my jacket. A girl no older than 9 looked up and asked, "Are you the one who used to live here?" "I used to read here," I said, kneeling beside her, "and now I get to help teach here. Fair trade, right?" She nodded solemnly and clutched her folder like it was gold. Just before noon, Martha arrived, holding a wrapped package tied with twine. "Something for your shelf," she said, and passed it to me. It was Harold's copy of The Richest Man in Babylon, edges curled, spine worn from rereading. His handwriting was still in the margins. On the inside flap, he had underlined twice, "Wealth that comes quickly goes the same way." I swallowed hard. Minutes before we opened the session, Jenna handed me an envelope someone had left at the door. No return address, but I recognized Sophie's looping cursive on the front. Inside was a $15,000 cashier's check and a note. "For the work you're doing, I believe in it." I took it outside and slipped it into a stamped envelope along with a sticky note of my own. "Use it to apologize to yourself first." No signature, just the truth. The first session began with a dozen students, teenagers, a few single moms, a retired mechanic who wanted to understand this credit stuff before his nephew sweet-talked him into co-signing. They listened, really listened. "My name is Avery Whitman," I began, "and I'm here because my grandfather taught me that legacies aren't about names. They're about what you fix before you go." They nodded. I could see myself in some of their eyes. A woman in the back wrote furiously, her pen moving faster than her hand could keep up. Halfway through, a little girl raised her hand. "My mom says money makes people mean." I smiled. "Only if they forget who they are. That's what we're here to remember." The session ended with applause, but I didn't stay to bask in it. I helped fold the chairs, thanked the volunteers, and watched the last few attendees drift out into the spring air. Back at the welcome table, I picked up my phone to check the time. One missed call, one new voicemail. The number was familiar. My father. I stared at the screen for a moment, thumb hovering. Then I pressed delete. No curiosity, no regret. That chapter was over. Outside, the breeze lifted the banner just enough for me to catch Harold's name again. He wasn't gone. Not really. He was here. In every folder, every question asked, every story shared, and now, finally, so was I. Harold's name still hangs on that banner outside the center, but it's not the name that gives me peace. It's the silence I chose for myself. In the quiet, I finally heard what love without conditions sounds like. Sometimes inheritance isn't about money or property. It's about the courage to draw your own boundaries and the grace to rebuild from there. Families can falter, but healing starts the moment we decide to stop proving our worth and start protecting it. If this story reminded you of something unspoken in your own life, I'd love to hear it. Leave a comment or simply take a breath. For yourself and the legacy you're still writing, and where are you watching from today? I'd love to know what part of the world you're in and whether this story stirred something in you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. You never know who might need to read your words.